Welcome to Lace-Lit Audiobooks, The Mind Alchemist. Introduction. For generations, we've been taught to seek answers outside ourselves. But real transformation happens when we turn inward and begin reshaping the very tool that shapes everything, our mind. This book will not lecture you, it will remind you of who you are, of what you've always been capable of. Each chapter is a key, a spark, a catalyst. It will take you deep past surface thoughts and into the mechanics of your inner power, where belief becomes reality and energy becomes result. This is not fiction. This is not theory. This is your invitation to become the conscious creator of your life, not its passenger. The alchemy begins the moment you believe it's possible, and it becomes unstoppable the moment you know it already lives within you. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Power Within. There's something quietly extraordinary about the moment a person realizes their entire world has been shaped not by the external chaos they fear, but by the internal dialogue they barely notice. In a modest corner of Asheville, North Carolina, a woman named Maya Turner sat alone behind the counter of a fading bookstore, surrounded by towers of dusty paperbacks and unread dreams. She had lived most of her life beneath a blanket of quiet doubt, whispering to herself that she wasn't meant for anything more than routine. But on one rainy evening, when her world outside looked like the color of ash, she discovered an old book wedged between two forgotten encyclopedias. Its leather cover was cracked, its title barely legible, The Mind Alchemist. Something about it pulled her in. As she flipped through the fragile pages, she was struck by the overwhelming idea that maybe, just maybe, the life she had was not all there was. That night, a light came on, not in her room, but in her mind. What Maya discovered, and what you're about to uncover in these pages, is that the most powerful force in your life isn't fate, money, or even luck. It's the quiet engine of your own consciousness. The greatest untapped reservoir in the universe lives behind your eyes, and this power, the power within, sits patiently, waiting for you to look inward and finally remember who you really are. For years, society has trained you to believe that your circumstances are stronger than your imagination, that life happens to you, and your role is to react. But what if that belief itself is the lock keeping your mind in chains? The truth is, every thought you think, every emotion you allow, every story you repeat in your head, it all wires your brain, shapes your nervous system, and sculpts your reality. The most successful people in history, from inventors and entrepreneurs to artists and philosophers, were not necessarily smarter or luckier than the rest. What they had, what you already have, is a mind willing to imagine something different and bold enough to believe in it. Your brain is not fixed. It is malleable, ever-changing, shaped daily by your focus and intention. Neuroplasticity has proven what mystics said centuries ago. Your thoughts create patterns, and patterns become personality, and personality becomes destiny. Maya's transformation didn't happen overnight, and neither will yours. But the moment you choose to become conscious of your own thinking, the alchemy begins. Thought becomes awareness. Awareness becomes direction. Direction becomes transformation. The process isn't magic, it's mindset. The power within is like fire. It can warm your home or burn it down, depending on how you use it. So many people live like passengers in their own minds, letting fear drive the car, letting old trauma steer the wheel, letting the voices of doubt scream directions from the back seat. But the mind is not meant to be a cage. It's a compass, a lens, a bridge to the life you deeply crave, but were told was unrealistic. If you pause right now and listen closely, you'll notice that your mind is constantly talking. The question is, who's doing the talking? Is it the real you, the bold, limitless creator? Or is it the voice of a scared inner child, repeating stories that were never yours to begin with? Mental alchemy begins with awareness. Notice your thoughts. Don't fight them. Observe them. Like clouds drifting by. Ask, does this thought empower me or does it shrink me? Is this belief mine or was it planted in me by someone afraid of their own power? In Maya's case, she realized her story wasn't even hers. It was a narrative she inherited from a mother who was afraid to be seen, and a father who never believed in dreams. She had carried their fears like invisible weights, confusing them for her own identity. But when she chose to question those beliefs, she didn't just change her thoughts, she changed her brain, her energy, her entire direction. And you can too. Every time you replace a limiting belief with a liberating one, you are rewiring your mental blueprint. You are not just surviving, you are architecting. The truth is, belief is the fuel that activates the engine of your inner power. Without belief, even the greatest ideas remain dormant. But belief isn't something you fake. It's something you choose over and over until your nervous system starts to believe it with you. Start with one. I am powerful. Even if you don't fully believe it yet, say it. Write it. Feel it. When you speak it, you're not lying. You're calling yourself home. Over time, your inner world will begin to echo that truth, and your outer world will bend to meet it. Because here's the great secret. The world doesn't respond to who you are. It responds to who you believe you are. So how do you begin harnessing the power within? You start by turning your focus inward, like lighting a match in a dark room. You start by observing your daily patterns, identifying the ones that don't serve your highest self. You begin practicing gratitude, not as a trendy habit, but as a declaration of abundance. Gratitude rewires the brain to notice beauty, strength, and opportunity instead of lack, weakness, and fear. Then you visualize, not for fantasy, but for alignment. Mental imagery activates the same brain circuits as real-life experience. When you consistently imagine yourself succeeding, growing, healing, thriving, your brain begins to prepare for that reality. And most importantly, you take aligned action. One step, then another, then another. You do not wait to feel ready. You move and allow the feeling of readiness to catch up. The alchemist doesn't just think, they transmute. That's what you're here to do. You are the alchemist of your own mind. You are not your past. You are not your trauma. You are not the name they called you or the mistakes you made. You are the one who decides what all of it means now. Your story isn't over. It's being rewritten. Maya's story ended with her leaving the bookstore to open her own space, a studio for creative writing and transformation. But this chapter isn't about Maya. It's about you. You are reading these words because you've already begun to feel that stirring inside, the whisper that says you are more than your routine, more than your fear, more than your circumstances. You are the storm and the stillness, the student and the sage, the gold and the fire that melts it. The power within you is ancient, infinite, and waiting, not to be given, but to be remembered. So as you move forward in this journey, don't look for answers in the sky. Look inward. That's where the alchemist lives. That's where the transformation begins. That is the birthplace of everything you've ever longed to become. Chapter 2. Reality's fabric. There's a quiet revolution happening, not in politics or technology, but in consciousness, in the silent realization spreading through living rooms, morning commutes, and midnight reflections that the world we see out there is far less objective than we've been taught. It is shaped not by facts, but by focus, not by circumstances, but by the unseen threads of our inner perception. Imagine for a moment that your thoughts are not just private whispers, but the loom that weaves the very fabric of your reality. That's not metaphor. It's the most unspoken truth of human experience. In a small town outside of Boulder, Colorado, a man named Elliot stood at the edge of his own unraveling. A former architect turned recluse after the loss of his son. Elliot believed the world had closed in on him, that life had nothing left but shadows. His once imaginative mind had become a theater of worst-case scenarios and unrelenting grief. But one morning, while walking a forest trail he hadn't visited in years, something shifted. As sunlight spilled through the canopy above, he paused. Not because of the beauty, but because it felt unfamiliar. Why does this feel like a new place? He asked himself. And that's when it hit him. The trail hadn't changed. He had. For years, the world around him had been filtered through the lens of sorrow. Everything he saw confirmed what he already believed, that life was cold, empty, and against him. But that day, for just a breath of a moment, he saw the forest as it was, not as his pain painted it. That one crack in the lens was enough to begin a new frame of reality. Because the truth, raw, profound, and often uncomfortable, is that we do not see the world as it is. We see it as we are. Your thoughts don't just reflect reality, they select it. Every belief is a filter, every expectation is a blueprint, and every repeated thought builds neural scaffolding that becomes the architecture of your personal world. You are not a passive observer. You are a projector. The brain doesn't wait for reality to confirm things before it believes them. Instead, it believes something first, then works backward to shape reality accordingly. If you expect betrayal, your nervous system becomes hyper-aware of it. If you expect opportunity, you begin noticing doors that were always there but previously invisible. Your focus determines your frequency. That's not pseudoscience. It's psychology and physics intertwined. The quantum world, in fact, confirms this. On the subatomic level, particles exist in multiple potential states until observed. It's the act of observation that collapses possibility into reality. In essence, your attention activates existence. What you give your awareness to, you energize. What you ignore withers. This is the fabric of reality, not solid stone, but vibrating potential shaped by mind. And this understanding, when truly felt, is like being handed a key you never knew you'd lost. Because it means that even if you've lived years believing you're unlucky, unworthy, stuck or small, you can begin to weave a new pattern. Not by forcing the external to shift, but by altering the signal you're emitting from within. It's what Elliot began to practice. He didn't chant affirmations or deny his grief. Instead, he started gently, asking himself better questions. What if today offers something different? What if I'm allowed to feel both sorrow and hope? As his thoughts softened, his perceptions changed. He noticed new people, new energy, and eventually new meaning. The same street corners once filled with painful memories slowly transformed into stages for unexpected beauty. That's the miracle of mental alchemy. You don't erase your past, you reinterpret it. And in doing so, the world begins to look new, not because it changed, but because you did. The people who live powerfully aren't necessarily the ones with better luck. They're the ones who have stopped outsourcing their meaning. They've realized that it's not what happens, but how you frame what happens that writes your reality. You've felt this before, haven't you? The way a single compliment can lift your whole day, or how one fearful thought can twist your stomach and make the room feel smaller. That isn't just emotion. It's the power of thought sculpting your nervous system and interpreting your sensory data. Your brain is like a prediction machine, constantly scanning your internal map to fill in blanks. But if the map is outdated, fear-based, or inherited from others who lived in survival mode, you'll keep walking in circles, even when the terrain has changed. To alter your reality, you must first audit the map. Ask yourself, what do I consistently expect from life? What assumptions do I make about people, money, love, and purpose? What thoughts am I rehearsing on loop? Those questions are not just reflective, they are corrective. They help you pull threads from the old reality and begin weaving a new one. But this isn't about faking positivity. It's about becoming the conscious author of your mental narrative. True mental alchemists aren't blindly optimistic. They are deliberate. They know that thoughts have tone, and tone becomes texture, and texture becomes reality. So they choose their thoughts the way a composer chooses notes, with care, with clarity, and with belief in the final symphony. That's what you're invited to do now. Start seeing your mind not as a mirror, but as a canvas. Every morning when your eyes open, ask, what kind of world will I choose to see today? And mean it. Mean it so deeply that your body responds. Because that choice, done repeatedly, is how you begin changing not only what you see, but what sees you. As you elevate your thoughts, you elevate your vibration. And just like a tuning fork, you begin resonating with experiences that match your new frequency. You'll notice things you never saw before, not because they weren't there, but because you weren't tuned to them. Love, opportunity, synchronicity, they've always been knocking. You just needed to open the right perceptual door. Eliot did. And months later, he started a community project, helping grieving parents use writing and storytelling to transform their pain. The same mind that once created a world of despair now designed spaces of hope. Because that's the real secret. You are always creating. The only question is, what are you creating unconsciously that you could begin to create deliberately? Your thoughts are the loom. Your beliefs are the threads. Your focus is the hand that weaves. Every moment you are weaving the tapestry of your life, not by reacting to reality, but by designing it from within. That is reality's true fabric, and it has always been yours to shape. Chapter 3. The Silent Architect. There's a presence inside you that never speaks, never boasts, never demands attention, and yet it quietly builds the structure of your entire life, brick by invisible brick. It's not the loudest voice in your mind, but it's the most powerful, the silent architect, the one who designs your identity, your responses, your beliefs, your limitations, and your freedoms. You won't hear it in arguments or declarations. It doesn't need noise to function. Instead, it works in the background, shaping how you see the world and, more importantly, how you see yourself. Consider a man named Elijah from Denver, Colorado, who spent most of his adult life in the shadow of disappointment. After being passed over for a promotion for the third time in 5 years, he told himself, I guess I'm just not leadership material. What he didn't realize is that the moment he said that, his inner architect added a beam to the ceiling of his potential and began lowering it. Every story he told himself about being just average wasn't a harmless comment. It was a design order, and his mind followed it like a loyal builder. The silent architect within us doesn't question the blueprints we provide. It simply builds based on what we continuously affirm. And that's the terrifying and liberating truth. Your inner world obeys the structure you silently reinforce, whether it limits you or frees you. If you constantly declare, "I can't," the architect reduces your openings, makes the corridors narrow, the ceilings low. If you whisper, "I am not enough," it removes doors to opportunities you never even saw. But the opposite is also true. Whisper, "I am becoming," and the architect lays foundation for growth. Say, "I am worthy," and suddenly you start seeing pathways where before there were only walls. The mind does not argue, it accepts. And that's what makes this chapter one of the most vital in your journey, becoming aware that you are the one handing out the blueprints. The architect builds what you silently affirm day after day. Your beliefs are the ink, your emotions, the cement, and the structure becomes your lived experience. It is not fate that shapes you, it's your mental repetition. Elijah, for years, unknowingly told himself that stability was more important than risk, that failure was shameful, that speaking up meant causing conflict. And so the architect built walls of caution, floors of fear, ceilings of silence. But the day Elijah asked himself, "What if the real risk is never trying?" That day, the design shifted, subtly, slightly, but permanently. That's when his silent architect received a new directive: build for expansion, not protection. You must understand, this isn't about pretending life is perfect or forcing toxic positivity into your narrative. It's about recognizing that even your smallest repeated self-commentary becomes an instruction to your subconscious. The mind doesn't wait for permission to build. It builds according to your emotional investment. If you've emotionally charged your fears more than your dreams, guess which structure gets reinforced? Your inner architect is always working, whether you're aware or not. And because it doesn't argue, it builds both castles and cages with equal commitment. So, pause and reflect. What phrases are you handing to your builder each day? "I'm too old. I never finish anything. People don't listen to me. I'm not creative." Each one becomes a load-bearing wall in your mental structure. Now, imagine replacing them with, "I'm just getting started. I follow through more each day. My voice matters. My creativity is awakening." These aren't affirmations for the sake of comfort. They are commands, blueprints, orders to the very core of your design system. And that's the shift you must make, not just thinking positive, but becoming conscious of your mental construction. The most sacred work you'll ever do is not in front of a crowd or in the eyes of others. It's the quiet dismantling of beliefs that no longer serve you and the intentional rebuilding of those that do. The silent architect isn't a judge. It's not deciding whether you're good or bad, smart or slow, successful or failing. It's simply taking your repeated thoughts and molding a reality around them. If that doesn't make you stop and breathe a little deeper, it should, because it means that no matter how far you've wandered from your highest self, you can begin today to rebuild. And it won't require shouting or proving or waiting for external validation. The greatest changes happen silently, brick by brick, thought by thought, one courageous inner shift at a time. Elijah didn't become a different man overnight, but he began asking better questions. He started tracking which thoughts energized him and which ones drained him. He journaled like a builder, taking notes from the foreman. This wall doesn't belong here anymore. This window needs to be wider. This ceiling can rise. Eventually, his external life began to echo those internal renovations. New confidence, a creative side hustle, a leadership opportunity he finally said yes to. He didn't become more powerful. He uncovered that he already was. And that's the revelation you must remember. The silent architect is not building you from scratch. It's revealing what's already been buried beneath years of mental debris. You are not broken. You are buried. And the rebuilding starts when you finally take the pen back from fear and start sketching your future from truth, not trauma. So today, hand your architect a new design. Speak it, write it, feel it. Let every empowered thought be a hammer in your hand, every act of self-respect a new beam in your structure, every choice of courage a widening of your hallway. Because no one else can build your life from the inside out but you. The question is no longer, if your mind is building, it is. The question is, what are you allowing it to build? And more importantly, is it worthy of who you're becoming? Chapter 4. Beyond Perception. In the quiet stillness between stimulus and response, there exists a hidden space. A space where reality isn't dictated by what we see, but by how we interpret what we see. And it is within this space that the alchemy of life begins to unfold. Most people walk through their lives wearing lenses they never chose, shaped by culture, trauma, upbringing, and social conditioning, believing what they perceive is what is true, when in fact what they see is merely a filtered echo of their own internal landscape. In Denver, Colorado, a man named Elijah Harris spent nearly a decade believing the world was cold, unkind, and disinterested in his existence. After a painful divorce and years of struggling with his mental health, he had concluded that people would always leave. Love was conditional, and joy was a rare accident. But everything changed on the day he was asked to volunteer at a local community shelter, not because the shelter changed the world, but because it changed the way he saw the world. On his first day, he met a homeless veteran who, despite having lost his legs and family, smiled like he was cradling the sun. The man said, "When I lost everything, I started seeing everything." That sentence burrowed into Elijah's heart and wouldn't let go. It was then he realized that his suffering wasn't just from what happened to him, it was from how he perceived what happened. And in that moment, perception cracked open, like a shell revealing something luminous inside. What we experience is never neutral. It is colored entirely by the meaning we assign to it. Two people can live through the same moment. One sees tragedy, the other sees awakening. One sees betrayal, the other sees redirection. One sees failure, the other sees feedback. The event remains, but perception transforms it. And that transformation, that sacred act of redefining reality from the inside out, is the heartbeat of mental alchemy. Your perception isn't passive, it is a creative force. It builds emotional architecture, dictates your emotional weather, and becomes the scaffolding of your life. When you learn to see differently, you begin to live differently. But the shift doesn't come from affirmations pasted over wounds. It comes from courageous self-inquiry, the willingness to question your own reactions, and the maturity to ask, is this truth or just my perception of it? Most people don't live their lives. They live their stories about their lives, repeating interpretations that feel familiar but aren't always true. They carry labels like scars. I'm not good enough. I always get abandoned. People like me never succeed. But none of these are facts. They're old perceptions worn thin by repetition. And the most liberating truth is this: perception can be rewritten. Like a painter swapping colors on a canvas, you can begin to adjust how you see your past, your present, and what's possible in your future. You are not stuck with the way you've always seen. In fact, the greatest breakthroughs often come not from gaining anything new, but from unseeing what was never accurate to begin with. Imagine the power in that, living with your eyes open, not just to what is visible, but to what is possible. Elijah began to notice things he had never seen before. The gentleness in strangers, the way the wind seemed to carry meaning, the possibility that the universe wasn't against him. It had just been waiting for him to see it clearly. His depression didn't vanish, but it softened. His bitterness didn't disappear, but it surrendered its grip. Why? Because he changed how he looked at his life. He stopped being a prisoner of his past lens and began creating a new one, deliberately, lovingly. And the beautiful paradox is, once you stop believing everything your mind tells you, you begin to see with your soul. Perception is shaped by focus. What you focus on, you feel. Focus on lack, and you feel scarcity. Focus on connection, and you feel love. Focus on fear, and the world becomes a threat. But focus on growth, and everything, even pain, becomes a teacher. The question is never, what is happening to me, but what am I focusing on, and what meaning am I giving it? You are the storyteller, not just the story. You are the lens maker, not the lens. You can choose to see betrayal as the end, or as the moment you finally chose yourself. You can see failure as a dead end, or as the doorway to reinvention. You can see heartbreak as a wound, or as the place where your compassion deepened. These aren't just poetic choices, they are neurological pathways. The moment you change perception, your brain fires new synapses, your emotions shift, your decisions transform, and your entire life starts to take a different shape. And here's the secret most people don't realize. Perception doesn't just alter how you feel, it alters what you attract. Energy moves toward clarity. When you begin to perceive yourself as worthy, the world mirrors it back. When you begin to perceive struggle as sacred, your path begins to reveal deeper meaning. When you begin to perceive time not as your enemy, but as your ally, your anxiety dissolves into trust. Everything begins with what lens you wear, and whether you realize you're even wearing one. The greatest minds in history, from Einstein to Buddha, have all said the same thing in different languages. The world is not what it is what you are. Perception is the canvas, you are the brush. You cannot always control what happens, but you can choose how you see what happens. And in that choice lies everything, your peace, your power, your liberation. Elijah now speaks to others who feel broken, not as a savior but as a mirror, reminding them that the power to heal isn't out there, it's already inside, waiting to be remembered. And the remembering begins when you dare to see differently. The world you long for isn't far away. It is simply on the other side of a shift in vision. So ask yourself now, what have I been perceiving as fixed that might actually be fluid? What story have I been telling that might no longer serve me? What pain have I been holding that might reveal a gift if I only turned it to the light? The journey beyond perception is not about denial. It's about depth. It's about realizing that life is not happening to you, but through you. You are not the victim of reality. You are its co-creator. When you begin to live from that truth, Everything changes, not just in your mind, but in your life. Because once you change the way you see, you change what you're able to receive. And that, dear reader, is when the magic begins. Chapter 5. The Alchemy of Belief. Belief is the silent architect of every outcome in your life, yet most people never stop to question who laid the blueprint. In a quiet suburb of Cincinnati, a man named Elijah Grant once lived with the belief that failure was his destiny. His father had tried and lost everything in a failed business. His teachers told him he wasn't smart enough, and by the time Elijah was 27, he wore disbelief like a second skin. Each day, he woke up expecting things to go wrong, and they usually did. Not because he was cursed, not because he lacked talent, but because his mind had been trained to reject possibility before it could ever arrive. That's the invisible work of belief. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It becomes the lens through which you view every challenge, every person, every decision. It colors your perception and quietly pulls you into alignment with what it expects. Elijah's turning point came not through therapy or success, but through desperation. One night, with nothing left to lose, he attended a small community talk at a local library, more to escape the cold than to learn. The speaker wasn't famous. She wasn't a doctor. She was a former addict named Clarissa, who said one thing that cracked open his reality. Your belief system isn't a reflection of truth. It's a reflection of repetition. That sentence hit Elijah like a lightning bolt. For the first time, he questioned whether the voice in his head was even his. And from that moment on, his life began to shift, not because magic happened, but because he happened. When you understand the alchemy of belief, you realize that your mind doesn't need to be forcefully reprogrammed. It needs to be reawakened. Every belief you hold was once a thought you kept thinking, and every thought you keep thinking becomes a groove in your brain, a path of least resistance. The brain loves familiarity, not truth. That's why lies can feel safe and new dreams can feel dangerous. But the mind is not your master. It's your instrument. When you believe something deeply enough, your body, actions, decisions, and even your energy begin to synchronize with that belief. This is why confident people often succeed even when they lack skill, because belief magnetizes experience. People, opportunities, and outcomes are drawn toward your conviction like iron. To a magnet, the alchemy lies in understanding that belief is not about evidence. It's about choice. It's the decision to trust in a possibility before the world gives you permission. Some will say, "But I need proof to believe." And yet, history's most transformational figures believed without proof. Martin Luther King Jr. believed in a dream others couldn't see. Elon Musk believed in electric cars and rockets to Mars when people laughed at him. Oprah believed she had a voice worth hearing, even when no one was listening. They didn't wait for the world to agree. They believed, and then the world adjusted. So ask yourself, what beliefs are shaping your reality right now? And more importantly, where did they come from? Were they planted in you by love or by fear? Were they handed down through culture, family, or failure? So many people walk through life like inherited software, running programs they never wrote, accepting limits they never tested. But you are not code. You are consciousness, and belief is the language of your inner architect. If you want to change your life, you must first change the blueprint, and that begins by questioning everything you think is just the way things are. The mind can be tricked, but the heart knows truth. That's why your real beliefs are not in your head. They're in your behavior. If you say you believe in love but run from intimacy, the belief hasn't taken root. If you say you believe in your dreams but take no risks, the belief is still theory. Alchemical belief moves through the entire system. It becomes your posture, your presence, your priorities. It becomes the silent code embedded in how you walk into rooms, how you speak to yourself, how you treat others. And when belief becomes embodied, reality bends to meet it. This is not delusion, it's design. Your nervous system responds to what you tell it is real. When you constantly tell yourself you're unworthy, your body will tighten, your decisions will shrink, and your world will contract. But when you tell your system again and again, I am worthy of more, something shifts. You breathe deeper, you speak clearer, you take the risk, you have the conversation, you step forward. The brain begins to remap, the heart begins to open, and life, like a mirror, reflects the shift back to you. This is belief as alchemy, the transformation of fear into fuel, of doubt into direction. Elijah's story didn't turn into a fairy tale overnight. He struggled, he stumbled, but he kept returning to that question. What do I believe right now? And does it serve the future I desire? That question became his compass. He began feeding his mind new input, books, voices, mentors, practices. He stopped speaking about himself with sarcasm and shame. He created rituals of reinforcement. Each morning he stood in front of the mirror and said, I am allowed to win. At first he felt like a fraud, but eventually he felt like a force. He started a small marketing business. It failed, but he tried again. This time, it grew. Now, years later, Elijah helps others reshape their beliefs. Not because he's a guru, but because he remembers what it's like to live inside a mental prison. And he knows now that the key was never outside. It was belief, always belief. So if you're still waiting for permission, for a sign, for someone else to believe in you first, this is it. You are the alchemist. You are the key. And you don't need to feel ready to believe. You just need to decide. Belief isn't a mood, it's a stand. And when you take that stand, the universe, like water, flows around your conviction. Life meets you where you meet yourself. So meet yourself here, right now, as you are, and begin to believe in the most radical thing of all, yourself. Chapter 6. Shadows of the Mind. There's a silence in the mind that most people try to outrun, a dark, still corner they never dare to sit with, let alone explore. But inside that silence are the whispers of everything you've buried. Fear, shame, insecurity, grief, rage. These are the shadows of the mind, not monsters, but messengers waiting to be acknowledged. In Portland, Oregon, a man named Elijah Moore once lived what appeared to be a perfectly curated life. Tech executive, father of 2, fitness junkie, and weekend adventurer. But beneath the Instagram perfect photos and LinkedIn success stories, Elijah carried a lifelong wound, one he never admitted even to himself. When he was 10, he overheard his father tell his mother, "He's too sensitive. He won't survive this world." It was just a sentence, but it carved itself into Elijah's psyche like stone. From that day forward, he wore armor, emotional detachment, hyperachievement, performative masculinity. He became addicted to being unbreakable. Yet every night he returned to a bed where anxiety wrapped around his chest like barbed wire. The truth is, the strongest among us are often the ones most afraid of being seen, and the most dangerous, Part of the human mind isn't the fear you can name, it's the fear you refuse to face. The mind is brilliant at repression. It will tuck away pain into hidden mental closets, labeling them too much or not now. But nothing stays buried forever. Every unprocessed memory leaks through your daily life, in your tone, your triggers, your relationships, your health. Shadow isn't weakness, it's unintegrated power. It is the part of you that holds the full range of your human experience, the dark ink that gives your light depth. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this is where mental alchemy deepens, not just by amplifying your strengths, but by embracing the parts of you you've been taught to hide. Your anger, when honored, reveals your boundaries. Your sadness, when felt, guides you to your truth. Your jealousy, when examined, shows you what you value. Every shadow is a clue, but the modern world rewards distraction and avoidance. We medicate discomfort with entertainment. We blur our edges with endless scrolling, noise, caffeine, alcohol, and productivity. We avoid stillness, because stillness is a mirror, and the mirror never lies. Yet the mind longs to be whole, and wholeness only comes through courageous integration. Elijah's life unraveled, not because he was weak, but because he finally ran out of room to suppress. During a silent retreat, he sat with himself without his usual distractions. And in that silence, the sentence from his childhood replayed, not like a memory, but like a wound ripping open. For the first time, he cried, not the convenient tears of a bad day, but the soul-deep weeping of a man remembering his original hurt. In that surrender, something miraculous happened. The pain didn't destroy him. It freed him. Because when we face the shadow, we retrieve the pieces of ourselves that got frozen in fear. We stop reacting from old wounds and start responding from clarity. Shadow work isn't glamorous. It's messy, humbling, and raw, but it's the price of true liberation. When you deny your shadow, it controls you. When you embrace it, it empowers you. The people who seem fully alive are not unscarred. They are simply unashamed. They have walked through their inner darkness and come out the other side with compassion, not judgment. They no longer perform, they live. You can too. Start by noticing your triggers. They are signposts pointing to buried pain. When someone's tone enrages you beyond logic, ask yourself, what old story does this activate in me? When you feel irrational jealousy, ask, what desire have I abandoned within myself? The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, it is to understand it, integrate it, and allow it to soften the edges of your self-image. We are not only the light, we are the light and the dark, the sun and the moon, the healer and the one who needs healing. When you stop trying to be perfect and start choosing to be whole, your life begins to breathe again. You make room for truth. You begin to hear yourself clearly. You begin to understand that the parts you were taught to reject, sensitivity, vulnerability, confusion, are not flaws, but parts of the full spectrum of being human. Elijah eventually returned from his retreat, not with answers, but with awareness. He apologized to his children for the emotional distance he'd used to protect himself. He reconnected with his wife in a way that required full presence, not performance. He began therapy, not because he was broken, but because he was finally brave enough to become whole. And in his vulnerability, he became a better leader, a better father, a better man. Your journey may not look like Elijah's, but your shadows, like his, hold treasure. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. It shows you where you're still hiding from yourself. And when you learn to meet those hidden parts with curiosity instead of shame, you unlock a power that cannot be faked. A grounded, humble, integrated presence that others feel when you walk into a room. So sit with your shadows, name them, hold space for them, write them letters if you must, tell them they are no longer exiled, because healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. In the shadows of your mind lives the voice that has been waiting to say, I'm still here, I never left, and I'm ready to come home. That is the beginning of real inner power. That is the alchemy of the shadow. Chapter 7. The Art of Mental Transmutation. In every moment of suffering, in every instance where fear rises like smoke in the chest, there exists an unspoken invitation, a hidden doorway into the most powerful art form the human mind can practice. Transmutation. Mental transmutation is not about pretending pain doesn't exist or forcing positivity over wounds. It's about consciously taking the raw material of your emotions, thoughts, and perceptions and alchemizing them into something that empowers rather than imprisons. Imagine the mind as a great furnace, and every fear, doubt, heartbreak, or setback as fuel, not garbage to discard, but energy to reshape. The ancient alchemists believed they could turn lead into gold, and while most took this literally, the true mystics knew it was a metaphor for transforming the base elements of the self, anger, shame, grief, into clarity, courage, and personal power. In Denver, Colorado, a man named Ellis Monroe once stood at the edge of everything he knew, staring out at the city lights from a rooftop, ready to give up. His business had collapsed. His marriage had fractured, and he felt like a hollow vessel, walking through the world. But in that quiet, desperate moment, he remembered something his grandfather once told him. Energy never dies, boy. It only changes form. So what will you make of your pain? That sentence stopped him. It didn't erase the pain, but it reframed it. He began to ask a different question, not, why is this happening to me? But what can this become through me? That shift saved his life, and that is the art of mental transmutation. It's choosing to become the architect of your inner weather instead of the victim of external storms. Most people live as emotional reactors, bouncing between pleasure and pain, high and low, never realizing that every emotion carries energy. And energy is neutral until you assign it meaning. You don't transform your life by avoiding negativity. You do it by reinterpreting it. Fear becomes focus. Doubt becomes curiosity. Shame becomes awareness. Every feeling is a teacher wearing a different mask. To transmute is to look each one in the eye and say, I see you. Let's evolve. This doesn't mean sugarcoating your experience or spiritually bypassing your trauma. Real transmutation begins with presence, with sitting inside discomfort, without flinching, without numbing and saying, I choose to understand this. I choose to use this. Neuroscience now confirms what mystics long knew. Your brain changes based on how you interpret events. Two people can experience the same moment. One is broken by it, the other is forged. The difference isn't the event, it's the alchemy of thought. Ellis, over the months that followed his breaking point, began journaling each night, not about what went wrong, but about what he was learning. He stopped labeling days as good or bad and began calling them clarifying or refining. He rewrote the meaning of every hardship until those very moments became the foundation of his reinvention. Today, he helps others do the same, not as a guru but as a guide who knows what it means to sit in the dark and still choose to become light. That's what this chapter asks of you, not to deny your pain, but to wield it, to see every crack in your life not as a flaw, but as an entry point for new light. Mental transmutation is the skill of turning emotion into motion. It begins when you pause, breathe, and become the observer of your mind. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? What belief is fueling it? And most powerfully, is there a higher meaning I can assign to this? The moment you start doing this regularly, you stop being a passive recipient of reality and start becoming its sculptor. Life no longer happens to you, it happens through you. This is why the most resilient people you've ever met aren't cold or detached. They're alchemists. They've learned how to turn the heat of adversity into the gold of wisdom. They transmute. So how do you practice this in real life? First, acknowledge your emotions without judgment. Emotions are messengers, not enemies. Second, breathe deeply into the sensation. Let the energy move. Then, challenge the belief attached to the emotion. For example, if you feel rejected, ask, is this rejection or is this redirection? Then choose a more empowering lens. Even if you don't believe it right away, repeat it. The brain learns through repetition and emotion. Say it until your nervous system gets the memo. Finally, take a small, aligned action, one step that turns your internal shift into external momentum. Action seals the transmutation. The goal isn't to be positive all the time. It's to be empowered all the time, even when life hurts. Because that's when your power is truly tested. In the furnace. And here's the secret no one teaches in school. The more you transmute your pain, the more magnetic you become. People feel it. They don't just see your strength. They feel your depth. They sense that you've been somewhere dark and chosen light. That's the kind of presence that changes rooms, changes conversations, changes lives. The alchemist is not someone who avoids the storm. They're the one who learns how to dance with lightning and turn it into fuel. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, misunderstood, stuck, or broken, pause. Close your eyes. Place a hand over your heart. Remind yourself this is raw energy. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a transmutation. Your emotions are not curses, they're keys. Use them, turn the lock, transform, and walk through the next chapter of your life carrying not scars, but sacred symbols of your evolution. Chapter 8. Frequency of Focus. In the quiet suburbs of Denver, Colorado, a man named Julian Mercer once lived in the haze of constant distraction. His days were filled with background noise, social media, breaking news, overdue tasks, open tabs on every screen, and half-finished goals, lost in the fog of indecision. He was ambitious, no doubt, with journals full of big ideas and planners crowded with color-coded dreams. But despite all the tools and good intentions, something always felt just out of reach. His mind, though brilliant, was scattered like static on a broken radio. Until one fall morning, sitting alone in a coffee shop after yet another missed opportunity, Julian heard a man speaking at the next table about mental frequency. About how the mind, like a radio, only receives clearly what it's tuned into. Receive. That single phrase changed him. In that moment, he realized he'd been trying to manifest clarity while living in chaos. He had been trying to chase goals without tuning into the frequency they required. You see, focus is not just a skill, it's a vibration. It's a frequency you must deliberately align with if you want to receive the signal of what you're trying to create. Just as a radio station can't play rock if it's tuned to jazz, your mind cannot attract peace, success, or vision if it's constantly tuned to stress, fear, or distraction. The frequency of focus is the vibration where thought becomes power and energy turns into momentum. What most people call attention is really just mental residue. What's left after your mind has been pulled in 10 directions by fear, past trauma, other people's opinions, and a culture built on overstimulation. But true focus is sacred. It's when your energy, thought, intention, and action are all pointed in the same direction. And the world bends when that kind of alignment happens. Focus isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters with presence. The myth is that multitasking makes you productive. The truth is that it fractures your power. The human brain is capable of extraordinary insight and creative genius, but only when it's given the space to dwell in one place long enough to bloom. Think of the greatest minds in history: Einstein, Da Vinci, Jobs. They weren't constantly plugged into 1,000 things. They were obsessively focused on one. And in that one obsession, they found mastery, beauty, and world-changing breakthroughs. Julian, once easily distracted, began to rebuild his entire life around this principle. He turned off all push notifications. He stopped answering emails on demand. He created focus windows, 90-minute blocks of undisturbed time where he could dive deep into work that mattered. He replaced to-do lists with must-focus lists, and day by day his mental clutter dissolved. He found something unexpected. When the noise disappeared, his intuition got louder. The voice inside that always knew what to do, but was buried under the distractions, finally had space to speak. That voice is in you too. It's not missing, it's muffled. You don't lack direction, you lack alignment. You don't lack passion, you're just tuned to a frequency that drains it. Every thought you entertain has a frequency. Every emotion you feel is a vibration. And every moment you give away to mindless scrolling or anxious overthinking is a moment stolen from your deepest purpose. When your focus becomes intentional, your energy becomes magnetic. You begin to notice opportunities you once missed. You begin to hear your inner guidance without confusion. You begin to attract people and experiences that reflect your elevated state. This is not wishful thinking. It's quantum alignment. The frequency you hold most consistently becomes the reality you experience. So what does that mean for you? Right now, it means everything you want, peace, abundance, clarity, joy, is already available, but you must tune into it through focused thought and intentional action. Focus is not just about what you pay attention to. It's about how you carry that attention. Do you give it out of habit or with sacred purpose? Do you scatter it across 1,000 distractions or aim it like a beam of light toward what you truly value? Mental alchemy at its core is focus transformed into creation. When you realize that focus is your most valuable energetic currency, you stop giving it to anything unworthy of your future. You stop letting other people's emergencies become your priorities. You stop performing for approval and start creating for fulfillment. This doesn't mean you live in isolation. It means you live in alignment. You learn to protect your mental field like a temple. You begin your mornings in silence or intention, not in reaction. You write, breathe, walk, or reflect before the noise of the world invades your clarity. You turn your phone off when you're creating. You say no to meetings that aren't aligned. You pause before every yes and ask yourself, is this in tune with the life I want to build? These shifts may seem small, but they create monumental change. Focus compounds. Every moment spent in aligned focus builds the internal architecture of a life well lived. Julian eventually left the startup world to build a consulting agency that helps high performers reclaim their focus. His income tripled, His health stabilized. But more than that, he began to feel something he never expected. Peace. That's the hidden treasure in focus. It's not just about productivity or performance. It's about presence. It's about finally feeling grounded in your own life, not scattered, not anxious, but here, right here. The more you practice the frequency of focus, the more you become a lighthouse in a world of flashing lights. People will notice something different in your energy, an intensity without force, a calm without complacency. They'll feel that you are someone who knows where they're going, and suddenly life stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something you are co-creating with the universe. So ask yourself, what have I been? Focusing on that doesn't reflect who I want to become. What does it look like to live each day from the frequency of purpose instead of the habit of distraction? What one thing deserves my full focus today, and am I willing to give it? Because focus is not just a tool, it is a portal. And once you step through it with full presence, you'll find a world that's been waiting for your attention all along. Chapter 9. The Invisible Thread. There's a force moving through your life right now that no eye can see, no science can fully measure, and no logic can cage. It's the invisible thread, that inexplicable pull connecting moments, people, pain, and purpose into a tapestry far richer than chance could ever weave. In a small coastal town in Oregon, a man named Eli walked along the fog-soaked beach every morning at dawn, mourning the life he thought he missed out on. Once a jazz pianist in Chicago, he had abandoned his dreams after his brother's sudden passing, convinced that the music left with him. For years he floated, job to job, town to town, never truly anchored to anything except the weight of what could have been. But one morning, as the tide whispered secrets onto the shore, Eli found a small glass bottle buried in the sand. Inside was a handwritten note, faded but legible. It read, "Your gift never left you. It's waiting where the silence meets the soul." He stood there frozen, heart pounding, unsure whether it was a trick, a coincidence, or something deeper. Reaching out to him, that moment shattered something in him, not his grief, but his belief that life was random. And in that crack, something ancient slipped through. That's the invisible thread. Some call it destiny, others call it divine timing. It's the quiet synchronicity that shows up when you finally slow down enough to notice it. The stranger who gives you the exact advice you needed. The opportunity that appears the moment you let go. The feeling that someone or something has been guiding your steps long before you knew you were walking a path. The invisible thread isn't about fate controlling you. It's about awakening to the reality that your life has always been part of something bigger. Every heartbreak that broke you was breaking open a new door. Every delay was saving you from something you didn't yet understand. Every no was preparing you for a far more sacred yes. This thread is not a straight line. It loops, tangles, and often feels like chaos. But when you look back, you'll notice nothing was wasted. The missed trains, the failed relationships, the detours, they all led you here. The invisible thread isn't in the things you plan, it's in the things you feel. That eerie sense that something important is about to happen. That dream you can't shake. That voice telling you to turn down a street you've never walked before. It's subtle, but persistent, like gravity for the soul. And when you begin to trust it, life stops being a checklist and becomes a living conversation with the universe. We are trained to worship control, to plan 5 years ahead, to demand guarantees before taking a single step. But the thread doesn't. speak in spreadsheets. It speaks in symbols, intuition, and alignment. The mind will argue, but the soul will know. That job you didn't get, the person who left, the offer that fell through, it was never rejection, it was redirection. It was the thread pulling you back into rhythm. The moment you stop labeling every twist in your life as good or bad and start asking, what is this teaching me? Where is this leading me? That's when you activate the deeper current. You begin to live as if everything is connected, because it is. You begin to move with grace, even through chaos, because something inside you trusts what's beyond, the visible. And that trust, radical, unshakable trust, is what turns ordinary lives into extraordinary destinies. Eli returned to his piano, not with the old ambition, but with something purer, a reverence for the mystery that brought him back to it. He started playing for free at community events, never once advertising himself, yet somehow drawing crowds. One night, a film director happened to be in town for a retreat. He heard Eli play. The next year, Eli's music became the emotional heartbeat of an award-winning film, not because he chased success, but because he followed the thread. That's the quiet miracle, when you stop forcing your life into a mold and instead let it unfold from the inside out. Life begins to meet you halfway. This thread has always been with you, from the first breath to this very moment. It's the reason you stumbled onto this book. It's the reason certain words light up in your chest as you read them. It's the whisper that keeps pulling you toward more, even when logic says you should settle. And yes, the thread can test you. Sometimes it leads through heartbreak, loss, or confusion, because the strongest threads are pulled through the fire before they shine. But even in your darkest seasons, you are not disconnected. The thread never snaps. It only waits for your awareness to catch up. When you look back on your life, try tracing that thread. You'll see it in the friend who showed up exactly when you needed them, in the moment of rock bottom that became your turning point, in the loss that gave birth to your mission. Your story is not a collection of random events. It's a soul-designed symphony. And the more you listen to its rhythm, the more effortless life becomes. Not always easy, but deeply guided. Your task is not to predict every turn, but to stay tuned to your inner compass, to move when your heart nudges, to say yes when the voice within whispers now, to let go when your intuition says this no longer fits. The invisible thread doesn't need you to be perfect, it needs you to be present. The thread works best when you stop trying to control and start choosing to collaborate. When you treat life like a dance instead of a war. When you speak to the unknown with reverence instead of resistance. This is how you become magnetic, not by chasing, but by trusting. The truth is, you were never alone, never off course, never unworthy. You were always part of something intricate, divine, and deeply intelligent. Call it God, call it the universe, call it love. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you listen, because the thread is pulling you somewhere sacred. And every time you honor it, life responds. Not because you forced it, but because you remembered. You are not separate from the magic. You are the magic. The thread is in you, and you are in everything, and that is enough to change everything. Chapter 10. The Eternal Mind. There is something quietly sacred about realizing that the mind you carry is not merely a personal possession, but a fragment of something far more ancient, timeless, and interconnected than anything you were ever taught in school or told in casual conversation. Beneath the surface, thoughts that come and go, beyond the moods and shifting beliefs, behind the fears you inherited and the hopes you cultivated, there exists a silent intelligence, A mind not bound by time, not owned by ego, not born with you and certainly not destined to die with you. It is the mind behind the mind, the thinker behind the thought, the witness who never sleeps. In a small, windswept town in New Mexico, a man named Elijah Carter once sat in a desert shack and stared at the stars for 7 nights straight. He had lost his wife, his business, his reputation, and nearly his will to live. But on that 7th night, when the silence became almost unbearable, something broke, not in him but open. He felt a presence, not external, not ghostly, but like a remembering, a voice, not spoken but known. It didn't say words. It simply existed with such undeniable calmness that Elijah could no longer believe he was alone in the universe. In that moment, he didn't just feel peace. He became peace. That's the eternal mind. It doesn't speak in language. It speaks in knowing. And we all touch it in the rare moments when we stop searching for ourselves and start remembering who we are. The eternal mind is not a fantasy or spiritual metaphor. It's a dimension of awareness that sits beneath your conditioned identity. It is always here, but rarely heard. You touch it in dreams that feel more real than waking life, in the silence between heartbeats, in the moment your breath catches in awe. The truth is, we've been taught to believe our minds are like machines, born at birth, shut off at death, managed by neurons and chemicals alone. But the great mystics, the cutting-edge physicists, and even those who've had near-death experiences speak of something else, something that cannot be measured but can absolutely be felt. Your consciousness, the true you, is not confined to the space behind your forehead. It stretches beyond your skin, beyond your memories, beyond time. The eternal mind is where all intuition comes from, where genius downloads from, where true healing takes place, not by fixing, but by remembering. It is not bound by trauma, not scarred by history. It is untouched, whole, radiant. When you close your eyes and truly ask, who am I without my name, my job, my past? You are already standing at the gates of the eternal mind. Most people live entirely on the surface of themselves, chasing achievements, collecting opinions, afraid of stillness. But you cannot meet the eternal mind in noise. You meet it in surrender, in stillness, in presence. Not because it hides, but because it whispers, and the world is too loud. Elijah would later say that after those nights in the desert he no longer feared death, not because he wanted it, but because he had touched something that proved life doesn't end. It only transforms. That awareness, the one looking out from your eyes this very moment, is not aging. Your body grows older, your story unfolds, but the essence behind your gaze is timeless, ageless, eternal. And knowing that isn't a mystical distraction, it's a grounding force. Because once you realize you are more than this temporary form, you stop living in panic and start living with presence. You become less reactive, more intentional. You stop needing to prove yourself and instead begin expressing yourself. You stop clinging and you start creating. The eternal mind isn't about escaping reality, it's about deepening it. It's about recognizing that your thoughts are not you, they are clouds. You are the sky. Thoughts come and go, but the awareness remains. And this awareness, when tuned into, opens up possibilities you've never imagined. It's where inventions are born, where prophetic insight lives, where forgiveness flows, not from obligation, but from truth. Because the eternal mind doesn't hold grudges. It knows we're all just waking up. And in that wakefulness, even your pain begins to shift meaning. It no longer defines you, it refines you. Your past no longer haunts, it teaches. Your fears no longer control, they dissolve. In the eternal mind, life stops being something to survive and starts becoming something to honor. The secret is, this mind has never been far from you. It's been breathing with you, dreaming with you, waiting patiently while you've tried, on 1,000 identities, to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And when you finally remember it, life becomes something else entirely. Time slows down, colors deepen, relationships become sacred. You no longer look for happiness, you embody it. You no longer chase purpose, you live it. You understand that everything you've been searching for out there, peace, love, clarity, was never out there. It was in here, and always has been. When you begin to operate from the eternal mind, the world does not necessarily change. But your experience of it does. Challenges become initiations, failures become teachers, even your enemies become mirrors. And you begin to see that this isn't just your journey, it's a shared dream, a collective unfolding. Every person you meet is a reflection of your own forgotten brilliance. Every soul is you in disguise. This doesn't mean you become passive or ignore injustice. On the contrary, you begin to act with deeper conviction, because your actions are no longer based in fear, but rooted in truth. You speak not to be heard, but to awaken. You love not to be completed, but to overflow. You create not for applause, but because creation is what the eternal mind does. You are not just a human having spiritual thoughts, you are a spiritual presence having a human experience. And once you feel that, not just believe it but know it, you are forever changed. The mind is not just a tool for survival, it is the gateway to the divine. It is the alchemical forge where pain becomes wisdom, where longing becomes remembering, and where the separate becomes whole. This chapter is the end of one journey, but it is also the beginning of another. You are not who you were when you first opened this book. You have traveled through fear, belief, vision, presence, and power. And now you stand at the doorway of eternity, not in the sky, not in the afterlife, but in this very breath, this very moment. There is no need to search anymore. There is only the choice to awaken. And when you do, the universe doesn't just respond, it aligns, because the eternal mind does not seek, it simply is, and so are you.